Buenas tardes a todos, everyone. Welcome to the Hispanic Chamber's On Value Speaker Series. The On Value Speaker Series is presented by Alpha Plumbing and Heat. Our event sponsor today is T-Mobile One. Welcome to the Hispanic Chamber's On Value Speaker Series. The On Value Speaker Series is presented by Alpha Plumbing and Heat. Our event sponsor today is T-Mobile One. His service as a military officer, and his upbringing by his selfless and hardworking parents. Internationally acclaimed speaker and best-selling author DJ Vanas is a powerhouse speaker for Fortune 500 companies. His service as a military officer, hundreds of tribal nations, and over 7,000 audiences nationwide. Internationally acclaimed speaker and best-selling author DJ Vanas captivates audiences by introducing them to the Native American warrior spirit. The tribal principles that led the first cultures in America can be applied today to lead organizations with courage, find clarity in chaos, and serve at their best regardless of circumstances. Organizations such as Intel Corporation, P&G, Subaru, Accenture, USAA, Walt Disney, and NASA have relied on DJ's unforgettable stories, humor, and practical, easily implemented lessons. His specialty, creating a valuable experience for audiences of any size of background, from youth in poverty to senior leaders in national associations and Fortune 500 companies. Please welcome our On Value speaker, DJ Vanas.
Gracias, Joe. Thank you very much for all of you who are showing up to this session. I greatly appreciate your time. It's the most valuable thing we have to offer each other. So I'm happy that you're sharing some of yours with us today. We're going to talk about an issue that I think is going to be near and dear to everybody's heart, which is leading through turbulence, which we are all in right now. And if you are in a leadership position, whether it's in your family, with your team, your company, in the community of Colorado Springs, everybody is going through great monumental changes, lots of uncertainty, lots of fear, lots of doubt. And whenever leadership models go through turbulence, that's where a lot of times the gaps are revealed, but also so is our character. And so I'm going to talk about some of those concepts, some of those principles, some of those virtues that we really need to exercise. Sometimes we need to take them off the shelf and kind of dust them off a little bit, but they are definitely being called into use right now during this chaotic time that we're in. So with that, I'm originally from Muskegon, Michigan, although I am a longtime resident of Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm a proud graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, class of '93, proud to be. And we lived there for over 20 years, recently moving about 3 years ago, and now live in the San Diego area. So I have a lot of great memories of Colorado Springs, and really happy to be coming back, even if it's in this medium. So with that being said, I'm originally from Muskegon, Michigan. I'm a tribally enrolled member of the Ottawa Nation. And the way that we got our name, just like Ottawa, Canada, they took their name from us. Want to set the record straight. I want to explain how we got our name, because I'm going to use some of these tribal principles, some of these timeless, priceless, proven in battle type of leadership ideas that I want to be able to share with you today. My tribe is located in Michigan and southern Canada. We're on both sides of the border. And we had a vibrant trade network set up with all the groups in the area on the rivers and lakes. And that's what we were known for, is building canoes with birch bark that were extremely light, strong, fast, and maneuverable, that had hulls only a quarter of an inch, sometimes only an eighth of an inch thick. And a 30 or a 18-foot long canoe could weigh as little as 35 pounds. So these were engineering marvels. And we had this vibrant trade network set up in that area. And in the early 1600s, the French came and discovered us. That's the first joke of the program, so I hope you got it. They didn't discover us. We were already there doing our thing. And the French came up to us and they were impressed at what they saw, and they were a little bit jealous. Typical French. I always picture how this went down. They came up to our leaders and they asked a simple question. They said, excuse-moi, monsieur, please come. Who are you? Well, we didn't speak French. They didn't speak our language, so we totally blew the question. We thought they asked, what are you doing? So we answered. We said, Odawa, which in our language means to trade. And they said, Sacre bleu, you'll be Odawa. And they wrote it down. And we've been known for that ever since. I mean, the ink dried and that was it. And I always think, what a goofy way to get named as a people. The first thing they catch you doing, God forbid, you're known for that for all time. And then I stop complaining because I think, man, I could have gone a lot worse. Could have come across us while we were in the bushes. 400 years later, go to a big native gathering, Denver March powwow, gathering of nations, and you're meeting each other. What nation are you? What tribe? Kiowa. What tribe are you? Shoshone. What tribe are you? PP tribe. That would have been tough. But I know that my people were the original successful business owners in the state of Michigan. And I know that the principles that I'm about to share, I share with great confidence, knowing these leadership principles that are timeless, that are priceless, have helped and enabled my people, my tribe, to make it through some of the darkest moments in our tribal history. So they are proven, and I'm excited to share those with you. We actually call ourselves Anishinaabe, which means the people, but we're also known as Ottawa. So just a little tribal background there. And one of the takeaways there too is in our tribal traditions, we have a concept that we talk about quite a bit, and formed for 14 years, but it's that concept of a warrior spirit. And we call our warriors Ogichida. And that term has nothing to do with what we see in the media, on TV and movies. It's not that twisted image that we see of being the toughest kid on the block or even necessarily wearing a uniform. It goes back to the core of who we are as people. And it was to take our creator-given talent and ability, develop that over a lifetime so that we could be an asset or a benefit to the tribe that we serve. And today, whether that tribe is your family, your community, your business, your teams, your clients, your customers, we all have a tribe to serve. And especially in a leadership capacity, it is critical that we have that warrior spirit in place. That spirit that says, I will not quit. I will find a way. Whatever I need to do, however long I need to work, whatever steps I need to take, whatever help I need to get, I will find a way. That's what a warrior spirit is all about. It doesn't mean that we don't get knocked down. It doesn't mean that we don't get scared. It doesn't mean that we don't cry sometimes when no one's looking. It means that we keep fighting. That's really what this comes back to. So a tribal-centric way of thinking. I think this is critical, especially during times of crisis, during times of lack, or during times of uncertainty. And what a tribal-centric way of thinking is, it's digging in with what we have in our own backyards to create success. I've been privileged to, in the last 25 years of my life, work with 496 tribal nations, from the Arctic Circle of Alaska down to Florida, and from Maine out to Hawaii. And everywhere I've gone, I've worked with tribes, whether it was in the Arctic where it's 40 below zero, dark half of the year, and 60-mile-an-hour winds, whether it's down in Florida, where the moment you start to build something, it rots away because of the moisture, whether it's the mountains, the desert, where there's no water, high heat. Every tribe I've worked with used the resources that were readily available to create success. They didn't lament to the heavens that they didn't have more. They didn't compare and contrast and say, man, we would be so good at what we did if we only had the resources that that tribe up the river had. They didn't do that. They said, this is what we have to work with. Let's put our heads together. Let's be creative. Let's be resilient. Let's be flexible. And let's leverage the heck out of what we have to work with, what we have access to. And especially when we're going through tough times, this is a concept that we really need to adapt. Because right now, we are going through a moment where a lot of businesses are suffering, a lot of teams are suffering, people are wondering what the future looks like. But I want you to think about this. During the Great Depression, one of the most terrible economic times of our nation's history and the planet as a whole, IBM, company you may have heard of, actually grew out of the Depression. Whereas all these other companies, when all this bad stuff happened and the economy collapsed, all the other companies around them started to contract. They started to shrink. They started to let people go. They started to pare away all the things that made them capable of delivering great service. IBM didn't do that. IBM grew. They started to add capacity. They started to add a knowledge base. They started to gather more people. And what that meant was, and if you've ever heard the term fish or cut bait, you know, you might not be able to do one thing right now, but maybe there's something else you can do to build capacity for when this is all over. In 1935, due to this newfangled thing, the Social Security Administration had a contract that there was only one company in the country that could fulfill. Guess what company it was? You guessed, IBM. And they did payroll service for 24 million Americans, something along those lines. So it gives us a reminder that now is a time to keep growing in different and creative ways and to stay tribal-centrically thinking when it comes to the resources that we have available. And sometimes we already have what we need. You know, one of the things that stands out in my mind, there's a moment I had a couple of years ago where I was traveling through Jacksonville, Florida. And I was there to do an event, and I ran out of toothpaste while I was staying at the hotel. I went down to the gift shop, and I asked the person there, I said, do you have toothpaste? I ran out. And she said, no, we don't have anything like that. We don't have a gift shop. She said, but I think I can help you out. And she started kind of digging behind the desk and trying to find something for me. I thought it might be a toiletry kit or something. And she looks and finds what she was looking for. And she's so happy. She gives it to me, and she goes, there you go, Mr. Vanas. Now, I know when I do this in person, if you're further than 10 feet away from me, you can't see that this is an actual tube of Colgate toothpaste built for a Barbie doll. And she gave it to me. She didn't just give it to me. She presented it to me. It's like, oh, you know, I'm accepting. I'm like, oh, is that tiny? Now, I got to be honest. This is not what I expected. This is to some degree not even what I wanted. But this is exactly what I needed. And that's the mentality that we have to shift to during times like this, during times of turbulence. Looking at the resources that you have to work with, leveraging the heck out of them in creative ways. Because, and I'll tell you the awful truth, it's going to sting a little bit, but it's true. You're never going to have all you want. You're never going to have all you want. All the support, all the budget, all the time, all the personnel that you want. But if you look at it creatively, if you approach it with a tribal-centric way of thinking in your leadership, you can find a lot of times you have what you need. And that's really what we're talking about here. So let's unpack this idea. How do we lead through turbulence? Because the goal at the end of the day, especially for us in leadership, is to create something. It's a magical, mystical glue that keeps relationships together. It keeps teams together, military units, tribes. And that magical, mystical glue is trust. But it's not just trust. It's actionable trust. It's when people will actually respond to the trust that you have built with them. When people trust somebody, that we don't want them to stand back and go, "Oh yeah, I trust Phil. I get what he's doing. I trust him." What I want us to create as leaders is to be able to say, "Follow me. We're going to do this. This is what we're working on next." That's what we're talking about, where the rubber meets the road. And we build that with every interaction, with every word we say, with every deed. And we need to be aware of that as leaders. We are all transmitters, which brings us to the most important form of leadership we will ever see, the only one that actually works, which is leadership by, you guessed it, example in all things. The way that we talk, the way that we perform. Now, what this doesn't mean, and this is a false burden we put on ourselves sometimes as leaders, this does not mean by perfect example. And I think that leaders are most at risk for ethical violations when they're trying to maintain the facade of perfection. That's not what it's about. Some of the best leaders I ever followed, the best leaders I've ever learned about, interacted with, worked with, served next to, were not perfect by any stretch. They stumbled, they made mistakes. What we're not talking about a perfect example. What we're talking about is an example that's worthy of respect, worthy of trust, and worthy of followership. But we're not talking about perfection. I wouldn't wish that curse on you as a leader, even if you could achieve it, and you can't. Because once you reach perfection, you wouldn't connect to anybody else around you that you're trying to lead. But we do want to set a good example, a solid example. And it comes back to aligning what we say and what we do. That era or that time when you were a kid, think back to this. Do as I say, not as I do. Did that work for you as a kid? Honestly. Now, there's some of you that are probably listening going, "Oh, yeah, I always followed. I was a good kid." Right. That didn't work for us as a kid. It doesn't work for us as adults. Do as I say, not as I do is an empty leadership model because it's out of alignment. How dare we ask somebody else to do what we're not willing to do? We need to be in alignment in everything that we're doing and saying. When I was a kid, I was 14 years old. I was doing the yard. My dad was a master sergeant in the Air Force. He served for 21 years in the Air Force. And we were stationed at Keesler Air Force Base, Mississippi, Biloxi, which is smoking hot in the summer. And unlike Colorado, in Mississippi, we had tons and tons of humidity. So it was like a sauna. And we took a break and we were both soaked. I immediately went under the edge of the roof to get out of the sun into the shade. My dad steps out into the bright, brilliant sunshine and lights up a cool menthol cigarette. Takes a long drag, and I have never seen a more joyous expression on a human being's face. Takes a long drag on this and goes, yeah. DJ, don't ever smoke. It'll kill you. It's laughable. It's laughable because it doesn't hold water. It's not credible to say one thing and do something else. And we need to understand that as leaders because right now people are looking for the road ahead, the direction. They're looking for clear, consistent, we'll talk about that, communication, optimism. They're looking for hope. The attitude that says we're gonna figure this out, we're gonna find a way. We're going to keep working at it. We're going to keep working together until we get to where we need to be. It's an attitude of being resilient, of being persistent, of staying focused on our targets, and to remain hopeful and positive despite all the craziness that we're in right now, because it continues. And like I said, those gaps in leadership are really showing up. The leaders who are responding to this are leading well with their attitude. And the leaders that aren't are kind of cowering in fear in the shadows, and their people are responding accordingly. So attitude is one of those things we can't give enough foot stomping to because it's a game changer. And if you don't believe me, ask yourself this. Have you ever seen attitude get somebody hired or fired? We see that all the time. Have you ever seen attitude make a relationship stronger or break it in two? We see that all the time. Have you ever seen attitude make a good situation go sideways because of somebody's bad attitude? But we've seen that. And on the flip side, here's the good news. Have you ever seen a tough situation become better because of somebody's good attitude? That's who we need to be. We are transmitters as leaders. What we say, what we do is being transmitted out to our people, to the people around us. And they're picking up on it. They're tuned in. And they're getting a lot of things out of that transmission. Things like, how do we feel about where we're at? And I don't mean cover up the truth or deny what we're going through. That's not what I'm saying at all. But they're picking up on the transmission on how do we think the road ahead is going to look? How are we going to respond? How are we taking care of ourselves? How are we taking care of each other? There's a lot of things that are coming out in that, but our attitude counts now more than ever when we're going through turbulence as a group. Communication is important, critically important during times of crisis, during times of turbulence. And don't assume anything with your people. Don't assume anything with your loved ones. Don't assume anything with the people that you interact with on a daily basis. Everybody at some level right now is emotionally compromised in some way because of the stress, the strain, the uncertainty. So don't assume that people have it dialed in. Have conversations instead. It's a much better option. Because if you love your people, if you like them even a little bit, don't ask them to do what we are terrible at as human beings, which is to read your mind or read their mind. Doesn't work. So we need to be really, really up on our communication skills and practice diligently during times of turbulence as a leader. One of the things that we really need to do, make sure, is that we are communicating positivity, positive direction. And the reason why is because that kind of communication creates something that is critically important right now, which is hope. You can have all the resources in the world. You can have all the time, money, budget in the world, but if you don't have hope for the road ahead, it almost doesn't do you any good. So we want to communicate in a positive way and get other people there as well. We want to communicate in a clear way, just because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out when we're communicating clearly, we create, drum roll, clarity. And my gosh, do we need that now to cut through some of the fog and the stress and the confusion that we're in right now. We need clear messaging to our folks. Critically important right now. We need to be concise in what we say. What we don't want to do right now is confuse anybody any more than we're already confused. Be concise with your messaging. Be as clear and compact as you can. Why would you say something in 3 paragraphs that you could say in 3 lines? Does it take a little bit more part on us as a leader to do? Yeah. But it's going to have more impact in the end. So we want to be concise with our messaging. We don't want to, we want to create focused attention with our messages, not more confusion. I love a quote by Mark Twain. He said something brilliant about being concise. He said, I would have written you a shorter letter if I had more time. Think about that. Now, being clear and concise, the reason why that's so critical in our communication, this isn't my rule. This isn't a rule of Colorado State or the federal government. This is a world rule of communication that says the longer and more complex you make a message, the less impact it's going to have. Why do we think Twitter is so popular now? Short, concise, clear direction. That's what's needed now more than ever. And the last one is consistency. We want to be consistent in our communication. We want to make sure that we're clarifying where we're going, how we're going to get there, what the rules of engagement are, how we're going to take care of each other, take care of business, serve our clients. We want to be consistent with our messaging. And the reason why is because consistency builds trust. Consistency builds stability, direction. And what stability builds, or consistency builds most of all, is momentum. When we are consistent in our messaging, we start generating that magical energy of moving forward that we can only create with a consistent approach. And I'll give you the anti example to that. If you've ever worked for somebody that was in a leadership position for you, that wanted to recreate the universe every week, that every Monday morning you'd come in and say, we're going to do it all different. We're going to do everything. Everything's going to change. and everybody gets excited and everybody gets pumped up, and you start boldly off in that new direction until the next Monday. And then we're going to start over. We're going to do it all different. As exciting as that is, we don't make a lot of progress when we do that. So we want to be consistent with our messaging too. This is our responsibility as a leader, to lead. And this is one of the most impactful ways that we do it. One of the other things that is important to manage well as a leader during times of crisis is how we handle change, how we talk about change, how we handle it in our organizations. Change is one of those things that normal, natural. We get change that comes at a pretty rapid pace. But my gosh, in 2020, we are getting it coming at us tidal wave after tidal wave. So that's what's made this really hard, and this crisis really hard for businesses and for leadership. And the reason why change drives us crazy, there's a few reasons why, just the way that we're built, human nature. Number one, we like to be comfortable. We like to know what's coming around the corner. We like to know how the day of the week is going to go. We like to know what's expected of us. We like to be comfortable and have a rhythm. And right now, the rhythm, let's be honest, has been totally messed up. And so there's a resistance to change because it's thrown our comfort level off. But I want to tell you, one of the laws of nature teaches us that the more comfortable a natural system is, the more at risk it is. Now, I hope that puts a little bit of a positive light, but I know it's a lot of change right now and a lot of discomfort. But if you ever watch Discovery Channel, and the cheetah is waking up in the morning to go pursue breakfast, which gazelle are they going to go for? It's not the one that's vigilant, the strong one, the one that ate well, slept well, paying attention, looking around what's going on. No, that cheetah goes for little Ray that stubbed his hoof down by the river that day and isn't paying attention. That's the one that gets it. So that's one of the things that we resist. I know it's tough right now, but there is so much learning that leaders are going through right now. And I hope that you're one of them, that are taking notes, that are being creative by trying new things out, by going back to some old things. That's what going through crisis does for us as well. So the discomfort is there. The other thing that we fight against is we resist change. That's why it drives us crazy, especially changes that feel forced, which a lot of these changes do. And sometimes we feel resistance to change, even if the change is for our own good. Think about when you were a kid again. Go back to the times where you were forced to eat your vegetables, to come in on time, to do your homework. It was good stuff that was good for us, but we hated it. We resisted. So that's one of the other things that drive us crazy about change, and we're getting a lot of it, and a lot of it does feel forced. And the other thing that drives us crazy about change is fear, the fear that it brings because of uncertainty, because of a perception of lack of time, of money, of support. And your people are going through this too. And so going back to the communication piece, this is why we have to have these ongoing conversations, these check-ins. How are you doing? How are you holding up? How's your week going? What are you working on? To stay engaged right now more than ever. The stress that we're all experiencing going through change, we can mitigate that by going through a series of things. Number one, stay calm. I'm going to have a few five stays that I'm going to share with you right now. Number one, stay calm. Take a moment, take a pause, take a breath, take a knee, let the dirt settle a little bit in your mud puddle. Acknowledge the moment. Don't freak out. There's enough of that going on right now as it is. We need leaders who are calm, cool, and collected. If you know the story behind Apollo 13, true story, they made a movie of it with Tom Hanks and the, always famous Kevin Bacon. But that movie was based on a true event that happened in the US space program where we almost lost 3 astronauts halfway between the Earth and the moon. Not a good place to break down. And they were having all kinds of technical difficulties. They were losing oxygen. They had all these lights going off. Now, one of my good friends, and we've been buddies for a long time, his daughter actually used to babysit our daughters years ago. It's our first Native American astronaut, Commander John B. Harrington of the Chickasaw Nation. Incredibly cool guy, definitely a pioneer. The first eagle feather to ever travel out of the Earth's atmosphere went in John's hands. He represented Indian country and America as a whole really well. But I know the inside track of what they go through to operate under extreme stress. They have to be creative. They have to be resilient. They have to be self-sufficient. Now, that all being said, when Apollo 13 happened, everything was going wrong. And these astronauts that were trained to operate under stress were starting to freak out a little bit. And the mission commander on the ground, Eugene Kranz, could tell by their biometrics, the register of their voice. You know how when we get stressed, we start talking really high and really fast. He could tell that they were about to panic. Now, when our brains go into panic mode, we don't solve problems very well. We react very well, very quickly, but we don't solve problems very effectively. And he knew that. He knew that if they panicked and they lost their minds, they were going to die. So he stopped the conversation and he said, okay, gentlemen, I understand what's going wrong. Now tell me what's right. And in that short little phrase, their mind flipped over and went into solution mode, which is where they needed to be. And if you know the story behind Apollo 13, you know they put something together with cardboard, rubber tubing, and duct tape that got them home safely. That would have put MacGyver or James Bond to shame. And that was all because they were able to stay calm. Second thing is to stay philosophical about what we're going through right now. And I know that might be a hard ask to really think deeper, but I'm asking you to do that as a leader. Be philosophical. Change is one of those things that's inevitable, it's normal, it's natural, and we can spend a lot of time and energy cursing the heavens above, or we can learn to adapt. We can learn to gather our forces, gather our resources, and start to create new solutions. The choice is on us. I love the philosophy that comes from our tribal communities about change. That change was not to be cursed. It wasn't to be pushed away. It was to be embraced. Change was life. That's why the seasons changed and weather patterns and migration patterns and all those things were life itself. That's the way Native people have always looked at change. It wasn't something to avoid or be fearful or curse. Another thing that if you don't have a philosophy of change, I highly recommend that you get one, because you're going to need it from now until you draw your last breath, not just as a leader, but as a human being. The one that I carried with me, I stole from Lenin, not the one from Russia, the one from Liverpool, who had an awesome quote that I love. He's in one of his songs. He said, "There are no problems, only solutions." I love that. It's easy to remember. It's short. It's eloquent. It's useful. So be philosophical about the change. Stay grounded. Stay grounded in your values. Go back to, it's a great time during crisis and turbulence to revisit again what is truly important to me, to my team, to this business, to this organization. What is truly important? What do we need to stay focused on? Because if we lose that, it doesn't matter what we achieve, we're out of alignment and it almost doesn't matter. So we're just scrambling. Stay focused. Stay focused on your purpose, on your direction, what you have to work with. Stay focused on your resources. We're all going to need that during times of crisis. The first time I ever snow skied was in Colorado when I went to school at the U.S. Air Force Academy. I'd never snow skied before. And I went with a group of people, fellow classmates, cadets, who were all good skiers. I had never skied before in my life. So they all were good sports, and they went down the bunny slopes with me one time. And then they said, we're going to the blue and black slopes. Well, I didn't want to be left alone, so I went with them. And it was an awful mess to get down the slope every time. It was rough. I wrecked a lot. But one of the things I did like doing was catching air. I'd watch them catch a little lip and jump, and I would follow suit. And every time I did it, I wrecked. Every single time. And I didn't mean just wreck. I mean yard sale wreck. You know what those are. You're all over the slope. And my roommate at the time, Mike, he pulled me aside. He said, "Man, why do you wreck every single time you jump?" He said, "Where are you looking when you jump?" And I had to think about it. Because sometimes we do things unconsciously, right? We do things on autopilot, which isn't always good. I had to think about it, and I said, I looked down. He said, well, why are you looking down? And I said, because that's where I'm going to go. He said, no, when you jump, look where you want to go, not where you don't. And that little piece of advice changed everything. Because the next time I went down, I caught a little jump, followed my friends, and I landed. And I went, yay! And then I wrecked because I was celebrating too much. But it worked. So we need to stay focused on not where we don't want to end up, but where we are going. Critically important. Focus is everything. Where we put our time, our energy, our effort is going to be a direct result of have a direct impact on the results that we get. If we scatter it to the wind, if we're in freak out mode and we do a little bit here, a little bit there, and we're scattered, we're not going to have any effect in any one place. Actually, in those moments, we're doing the worst thing a warrior can do in battle. We are dividing and conquering ourselves. We don't want to do that. If you stand out on a sunny day for 5 minutes, what will happen to you? This isn't a trick question. You're going to get warm. You sweat a little bit. Nothing dramatic. Even though there's a star only 93 million miles away from the planet Earth, pumping an insane amount of energy at this place, it's spread out. So it doesn't have a big effect in any one place. However, if you harness that energy that's fallen gently on your face into, say, a magnifying glass, any 10-year-old kid will tell you what you can do with that. This ex-10-year-old kid used to do it all the time, and I got busted for it. You could light your backyard on fire. And it all comes down to focus. So we need to make sure that we maintain and honor that during the times that we're in right now. It's critical. And the last one is stay flexible. The goals may remain the same, but sometimes the tactics can and should change. You know, if you've ever heard that quote, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Which I never understood that. Why would you skin a cat? But if you ever wanted to skin one, remember there's more than one way. And what that speaks to is flexibility. There's more than one way to do it. Nature, one of our lessons that we always talk about in our tribal culture, we talk about lessons from nature, things that nature teaches us. And one of the lessons that we get is from water. What does water do when it runs into an obstacle? It doesn't stop. It doesn't complain. It doesn't freak out and go a different direction. It flows. If it can't go around it, it goes over it. If it can't go over it, it goes under it. And if it can't do any of those things, it'll knock it out of the way or go through it. It takes more time, but water figures it out. And we have to as well. This is our job as a leader. We want to keep our people motivated now more than ever. This is critical. Like I said, everybody's emotionally compromised at some level. There's a lot of fear. And, now we're talking about going back to school in the fall, and nobody even knows what that is going to look like in a lot of different places. So there's a lot of stress there. There's a lot on people's minds. So if we want to keep our people motivated, again, having those conversations is critical. Stay engaged with them, assume nothing, and make sure to give a little bit of grace right now, not just to them, but to yourself as well. Acknowledge their contribution. This is really critical to keeping people motivated in general, but especially right now. Acknowledge their value, acknowledge their contribution. I read a survey that was pretty profound it's called the Trust Outlook. They did a survey of 5,000 people, including international folks that were in business, all different levels. And one of the statistics that came back is 36% of the people that were polled said that they would be willing to leave the organization that they were with because of lack of recognition. Wow. Now, how do you think that number is looking right now in this time of turbulence, this time of crisis? You think that number's going up? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that one out. 36% would be willing to leave because of lack of recognition, not because of more pay, not because of more vacation time, because of lack of recognition. Now, I want to ask you as a leader, who's responsible for delivering that? You guessed it. Us as the leader are responsible for acknowledging that contribution of that person, calling them out when we catch them doing the right thing. Little things like that go a long way to boosting somebody's level of engagement and somebody's level of motivation. Let me ask you a real quick question. Why do squirrels collect nuts? You're probably thinking, where is this program going now? I was tracking with you, DJ. Now you lost me. Why do squirrels collect nuts? We know why squirrels eat nuts, because nuts are delicious. But why do squirrels collect nuts the way that they do every fall? Because they know winter's coming. They know times are about to get hard. And the other reason why they collect so many, they go overboard, is because, according to one study, squirrels lose up to 74% of their nuts because of, and this is sad, they forget where they put them, or they're stolen by other squirrels, which is really sad. But that's why they put so many away. Now, what does this mean for us as a leader? As a leader, what we want to do is make sure that we are also collecting nuts. And it comes in the form of those micro engagements that we have with our people. Micro engagements where we are acknowledging their contribution, where we have positive comments, where we're catching them doing the right thing, where we are checking in with them, where we are having a conversation about their direction, their growth, what they've done well this week, what they're working on, and what we can help them with. All those things do is we're collecting nuts to put away for the winter when times get rough, which they are right now. Doesn't mean that we're just going to withdraw what we've collected, but we want to keep collecting, putting nuts away for the road ahead as well. And every once in a while, you'll get, we'll continue the analogy, what I call a golden nut, which is that spectacular, life-changing moment that we get from our leaders that is so powerful, so empowering, so positive that it sticks with us for many, many years. Maybe it's still with you today. Now, it's where a leader believed in us, where somebody saw the good in us, that raised expectations for us. Now, we know when we receive a golden nut, but here's the thing. As a leader, we never know when we give one out. We never know when that one thing that we say or do for somebody else is going to have that huge impact. So my rule of thumb is, don't worry about it. Just keep giving out those positives over and over again. You don't know which ones are going to stick, but I do know that when times get rough, that's what we're going to be drawing from. So hope that you put enough away for the winter. That's on us. Catch them doing right, give praise. And here's the other thing, praise is free. You don't have to add a budget line item. You don't have to do paperwork. And I'm not a big believer in cheap praise. I mean, giving praise when it's earned. But it blows my mind how this is one of the most important resources we have as a leader, to acknowledge and to praise somebody for doing a good job. And we don't, and how little we do it. Two things that I've heard leaders say in the past that prevent them from giving people praise that they earned. Number one is, well, I don't want to tell my people they're doing a good job all the time because they know. I beg to differ. And again, I'll go back to what I said before. If you love your people, if you like them even a little bit, don't make them do what we're terrible at, which is to read your mind. Tell them how you feel about them, their contribution, what they're doing for you. Give them the guidance. Don't assume anything. The second thing that holds leaders back from giving praise to motivate their people is this one. See if you can appreciate this chestnut, where you hear leaders say, well, I don't tell my people are doing a good job for me all the time because I don't want to spoil them. Really? Now, let me tell you what I've seen in 25 years of doing this work. I have never seen somebody get spoiled from getting praise that they earned. I've never seen it. I've also never seen a baby pigeon or a unicorn, but I've never seen that. But you know what I have seen a lot of? People who've gotten burned out. People who are part of that 36% that I talked about that would leave an organization because they feel like they're working in an environment where no contribution they make is ever acknowledged or recognized or matters. So this is on us to make sure we provide it. It's free and it boosts somebody's spirit through the clouds. They will work hard for you and creatively, even when you're nowhere around. That's the kind of motivation that we want to create for our people, especially during hard times. That's our job. And the last thing that I want to unpack as far as one of those values or virtues that we need to be exercising through our example is the concept of humility. We all need outside answers, especially now. We all need outside support. We all need help. And we all need to stay connected. Because right now, more than ever, we do not want to rely on just what's up here to get us moving forward again. There are a lot of great resources, but what happens is we cut ourselves off from those when we refuse to ask for or accept help, which is not a good leadership look. Because we start painting ourselves into a corner and we start missing out on opportunities, the stress builds, chaos erupts. When I was 11 years old, I had my appendix removed. The hospital I had it done at, I think it was Learn As You Go Medicine. My dad's appendectomy scar is about 1.5 inches long. Mine goes from my belly button to the side of my body. They opened me up. I had 11 stainless steel staples keeping my body together. I was in the worst pain of my life. I was crying and moaning. Every once in a while, the door would open up and I would hear harp music and little cupids would float in. Oh, it was my nurse. As an 11-year-old, I was head over heels in love with this woman. And I pretended like I wasn't in the worst pain of my life. And she would come in and I would say, are you okay? How's the shift going? She would leave and I would go back to crying again. And at 8 o'clock, visitor hours were over. So she came in a few minutes to 8. She said, your parents are going to have to leave because my mom and dad had to help me do everything. They had to help me sit up. They had to help me eat, go to the bathroom, which is embarrassing, but at least it's your parents. And she said, visitor hours are over. They'll have to leave. But if you need help, I'm here to help you. And there's a call button. And let me know if you need something to eat, if you need something to drink, if you need help going to the bathroom. Now, when she said that, I remember my face and my neck got hot. I was embarrassed to even think about that. So as an 11-year-old, I created a strategy. I said, well, you know what? I'm going to hold it tonight. That was my strategy. It was not well thought out. I know that now. But that was my strategy. Now, when you come out of a surgery, what do they immediately hook you up to? A big giant bag of saline so that we stay hydrated. The more hydrated we are, the quicker we heal. Also has to make you pee about every 6 minutes. So I'm sitting there in my bed and I'm exercising my strategy of holding it. And that worked until about 8:23. And at that point, I had rivulets of sweat coming down one side of my face. I'm shaking my foot in bed. It's go time. Right side of my bed is a call button. Left side of my bed is a Tupperware jug that's already a third full. Decisions. And I made the fateful decision that I didn't need any help. I refused it. It was offered willingly. It was offered kindly. I said, nope, I got it. Sat out on the edge of the bed, shuffled to the edge, had the jug in front of me, ready to do my business. Paper gown, starched linen. The reaction to that was kind of like a plastic toboggan on a snowy hill. I started to slide. I sat up. I ripped a staple. Excruciating pain. I screamed out in pain. I dropped the jug. Story's bad. It gets worse. The jug hit the ground, went everywhere. I didn't stop sliding out of bed. I'm clawing desperately, trying not to keep falling, and I keep going, and no. Fell out of the bed into the puddle I had created. The story's bad. It gets worse. I'm laying there in pain, in my own puddle. Guess what I had to do next? You guessed it, ring the call button. She came in, my naked rear end's hanging out of my paper gown. I'm laying in a yellow puddle that I created. All my chance of long-term relationship were gone because of my pride and my ego and my stubbornness. Don't do that. We all need help. We all need support right now. When we refuse it, we not only suffer as a leader, but so does our team. And here's the thing, when we're accepting help and asking for it, what kind of leadership by example does that show? A good model. Because if they catch us doing it and understanding that it's okay that the leader doesn't have all the answers, they're going to be willing to find theirs as well. They're not going to lock themselves into the corner. So that's a great leadership by example moment. I was taught that traditionally we are a lot more like bees and ants than we are like eagles. We need each other. We're better when we're with each other. And so we need to exercise that, especially now in our leadership model. And by the way, this is also what makes the difference between an elder in our tribal communities and an older. An elder is somebody who collects as much good information as they can by asking questions, by being open to help, being open to support, new lessons, new experiences, and they gather all of this wisdom, not to hoard it, but to be able to share it and empower other people with it. That's what makes our elders elders in our communities. Older is different. We can't help that. Getting older is automatic. Getting better is not. And we're all going through that process as well. I remember being a kid and shopping for cereal with my mom, and you see all the colorful cereal. You could have cared less what was in the cereal. Could have been cat food. We wanted the toy that they used to put in cereal back in the day. You know, the little tattoo you'd lick and stick on your sister's forehead, or the little magnifying glass you could light your backyard on fire with. And, you know, that was all I cared about. But once you hit 45 and beyond, what's the number one ingredient we're looking for in cereal? You guessed it, fiber. What a sad turn of events we go through as human beings. So getting older is automatic, getting better is not. We put ourselves on that elder path as a leader when we're able to be open to new information and help and outside support. So with that, I know we wanted to open it up for questions. I know we covered a lot of ground, but it was all focused on helping you as a leader navigate this turbulent time in a graceful way and keeping your sense of humor intact. That's important too. But I know we have time for a few questions if there are any. Joe, fire away. Happy to field any of them.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, DJ. What an inspiring message. We do have some great questions here. The first one would be, what advice would you give a small retail business facing the possibility of shutting down due to COVID and being crushed by the likes of Amazon?
Oh boy, this is guerrilla fighting at its toughest. I mean, it really is, because when you're talking about those big companies like that and you're a small retail store, there's no other option except to get extremely creative. What can you do that they can't? That's probably the first question I would ask. Are you using all the resources that you can right now, including getting loans, getting extensions, talking to your creditors, if you're worried about the financial situation that you're in right now, which I get is tough. Everybody's in the same boat. I'm a business owner myself. I know it's hard all over. But that's what I would really focus on, is what creative delivery can you do that there's no way Amazon could. And I'll tell you, one of the things right now I think is really being revealed is how important customer service is all over again, the human connection, the human touch. And a lot of businesses are trying to find new creative ways to leverage that, because at the end of the day, I think especially going through times where we already feel like a lot of times we're a commodity, when we're treated special, when we're treated like a human being, people remember that. People will work with you again. People will spread the word about what you have to offer. So those are just a few. If there was a magic bullet to that, I would have given it to you, but that's what I could share with you on that.
Another question here. How do you get past it when you are offering help to someone, but they turn it away?
Can't force it. You just can't. Intentions can be as pure as we want to describe them as, but it's hard to force somebody to do what they're not willing to accept. I think one of the best ways to change other people, honestly, I feel this in my heart of hearts and in my core, is by example. Not by telling them how to act, not by telling them where they're dropping the ball, but by showing them what it looks like. I think that's one of the most powerful levers we have as a leader to affect change in the people around us. And then go back and revisit. Hey, are you open to this idea now? And that's what I would do, is try to find a way not to push, but to invite And the more that we can do that in the way that we talk, the way that we interact, delivery counts. It really does. And sometimes we don't even realize how harsh our edges could be sometimes when we say something. We need to work on that too. That's part of our communication set, but you can't force it. Be patient.
All right, here's another one for you there, DJ. Do you think telework is here to stay and will become more of an industry standard?
I think it'll be used a lot more going forward, regardless of how things end up. If we all go back to in-person everything, I still think that this is going to be a bigger part of the mix than it was before the pandemic. But I do not think that this is ever going to replace the in-person human-to-human connection. I just don't. I think we are all realizing how precious it is, how it's the most powerful human endeavor to be with other human beings. And I think a lot of people miss it, and we're not going to take it for granted again. But yes, now that we know how to use these tools, I think they'll definitely be here to stay, but they won't replace. Once we're ready to go back to in-person, I think everybody's going to be chomping at the bit to do so.
All right, here's another one here for you. What are some best practices for keeping employees engaged during current times and most who are working from home?
Frequent check-ins, definitely. Like I said, don't assume that you know what's going on. Go into it with the curiosity of a 7-year-old. How are you doing? How is this week going? What are you working on? Keep it simple, but stay engaged that way. The other thing is, oh man, I just had it. Repeat the last part of that question again, Joe.
How do you keep them when they're working from home? How do you keep them engaged during this?
Engaged. So having those conversations, and then the other thing is get them to be involved in your solutions, in the way that you go forward. And one of the 4 most powerful words you can ever ask your people are these 4. What do you think? That's 4, right? Yeah, that's 4. One of the most powerful questions we can ask, because it immediately draws people in. And I always used to tell my lieutenants when I was in the military, the teams that I ran, I would always tell them, I want to hear all your ideas. What do you think? I can't promise you we're going to use everything, but I want to hear your thoughts on how we solve this problem, on how we improve what we do. So those are 2 things I would recommend.
Great. What books, articles, TED Talks would you recommend?
Oh my gosh. How much time do you have? No, TED.
Another hour we have.
TED Talks are amazing. They are short, compact, content-rich boost-ups or messages of empowerment, messages of knowledge. So I highly recommend, in whatever subject you're struggling with. I mean, there's a TED Talk on pretty much everything anymore. Books I would highly recommend. Oh my gosh. The whole library. I mean, I've been going back over everything from Man's Search to Meaning to, I just read last week, The Alchemist, again for probably the 5th time. Any business books that get you back to a place of clarity and principles, and going back to the basics and fundamentals. I'm just trying to think. I mean, that's like, even asking that question, I'm kind of flooded. But everywhere that you can find knowledge, information, and make the time for it. I've been really going out of my way lately to carve the time to listen to, read things that are motivational and uplifting. Because my gosh, the environment we're in right now, if you go on autopilot, you're going to become a pessimist really quickly. So we need to go back to those things.
Do you take advantage of listening to podcasts?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right.
Yep, everywhere. And if I find something that's of value, I subscribe to it. But the thing is, that being said, you don't want to overwhelm yourself either. We've got problems to solve as leaders. We've got responsibilities to uphold. But I would say carve the first 30 minutes out of every day from now on to listening to or reading something that strengthens you and starts your day off the way that you want it to.
Okay, one last question here before we close out the day for you, DJ. What advice can you give someone who is fairly new to being in a leadership position to help keep positivity with change when teams are apprehensive to that change?
Be a good example of optimism in leadership. Constantly have conversations about creative solutions, what you're working towards, what you're working on. You know, there's, like I said, right now, I can't emphasize this enough. Even as a young leader, even as a new leader, I can't emphasize this enough. Out of all the conversations I've had the last 6 months, people are hungry for clear, positive direction. They are craving for it like they have never craved for it before because of so much uncertainty, so much doubt, so much fear and stress. People are looking for a clear, positive direction that is solution oriented. And when you can provide that, I don't care if you've been a leader for one day or if you've been a leader for 50 years, you're going to have an impact. People need that right now. So keep practicing.
Well, that's all for the questions, DJ. But we are thankful for your message today. It was received very positively for our guests, and we want you to stay safe and healthy out there in San Diego, and look forward to maintaining that connection because you have valuable insight to the world as we see it today, and we're very grateful for you being with us. So thank you very much.
Chimigwech, thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, that ends the show today, guests, but we'll keep you abreast of all of our events that are upcoming. Stay tuned. We'd like to invite you to our July 24th, An Evening With series. Sit back on Friday, July 24th to listen to some smooth jazz from Gregory Goodloe, a great way to wind down the week and enjoy your favorite cocktail on your deck or wherever your favorite place in your home would be on a Friday evening. So with that said, we'll close out the show and we look forward to connecting down the road. So thank you very much.